Dr. Edythe Heus, it is such a pleasure and honor to have you on the show today. Where does this show find you today?
So I'm in Southern California. I have a home in Dana Point where I go and stand up paddleboard, bike, and hike. And then I'm up in Thousand Oaks, north of LA, Monday through Thursday.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a good lifestyle. I love that. Well done. So I don't even know how to start this. Let's describe to me your area of expertise.
I would say that if I could consolidate it, it would be performance training. However, that being said, I don't just do functional movement. My background is doing integrative healthcare. I'm a chiropractor by profession, but I chose chiropractic because chiropractors were doing integrative healthcare. And I had a passion for muscles. This was before kinesiology was an actual career. Chiropractors were doing muscle testing. So I got into chiropractic school to do muscle testing and learn about movement through muscle testing. The first part of my career, the first 20-some years in New York City, I was working with patients that had really weird neurological things. I mean, I was getting patients that had no hope, like their doctor said, well, you can be on this medication, and that's not what they wanted. And not that I knew how to do it, I just had a willingness. I'm like, well, let's just see what your body will reveal to me, and let's see if it makes a difference. And the success was incredible. And I kept track of what it took to go from illness to wellness, and then had an epiphany 20 years later that I needed to move to Southern California and apply the principles to see if those patterns helped athletes go from injury or good athletes to the best version of themselves. And I was so blessed that within 3 months of moving here, I had developed the program and was working with a professional baseball player that led to a whole bunch of other professional baseball players, and then track and field athletes, and it went stuntmen. So I've just had the range of athletes, which has been incredibly rewarding because everything I learned from one patient or client somewhere down the road helps a whole bunch of other clients and athletes.
But your clientele is not just high-performing professional athletes.
No. So, when I got into doing the sporty part of it, it was all high-level athletes. And at one point, somebody that skis year-round, he can ski anything. And he is the president of a senior living facility company. They manage senior residences. And he said, could you create a program for seniors? And I thought, that's not my demographic. Then I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, this would be fun. And so I was able to create that program, which is doing incredibly well. It's called Vitality. I work neuroatypical children to my oldest patient is 99 years old.
So I took a class last week. What was the class that I took? It was a level 1, 2.
Yes, you took a hybrid, which is a level 1 that is a good entry into Rev 6. But you have the option of doing it on Bosu balls and slant boards. So there is an additional equipment option to the exercises.
I want to tell people my experience of this. And I mentioned to you earlier, Edythe, I've done Feldenkrais and martial arts, all kinds of stuff. This was, I didn't know what to expect. I found it, much harder than I thought. I kept falling off the ball. And I thought, well, okay, that'll get better. But what was super interesting to me was the effect it had on my body. I just did this one class. I found myself, I think the right word is springy. There was like this sort of springy thing. And it was different than stretching or different. It was just like different. It felt easier to propel my body through space than it had been beforehand. This is really remarkable. Like I can see how if someone was in a sport, like so I'm a ski racer. So, okay, this makes total sense to me. And our mutual friend, Rebecca Rush, the champion bicyclist, she's also a huge fan of yours. And I know people who are other really high performing athletes, why this would be great for them. But I think just regular people, if you haven't experienced this sort of sudden spring, essentially, talk to me about this. What did you do to me, Edythe? Why did this happen?
David, I have to say that the amazing thing is that you were able to allow your body to feel and to experience that. Some people have such a fixed idea of expectation out of a workout that they do it very tense instead of, relaxing into it and letting your body do what it wants to do when it's in contact with something that feels nice like a ball, or the instability wakes your brain and your nervous system up. The movements are the result of the design of our body. The exercises are all full body and take into consideration things like the small muscles, which is really contribute to your core. I refer to the small muscles like your lower abs, the muscles of your spine, deep in your hip rotators, even your pelvic floor, your hands and your feet. I see those small muscles, which are more rich neurologically, to be the megaphones that tell your bigger muscles how to move. Now, because my work works with the design of the body and the design of the fascia, it's the fascia that makes you springy and elastic. And the cool thing is the fascia it's like a unitard. It touches every cell in your body. And it's also so moldable. It's plastic. So when you stimulate it with the weights and the way that we load things and the instability, the fascia gets healthier. And it gets more durable, so you can undo injuries, you can prevent injuries, and you remain more mobile and durable as a result of it.
That makes total sense to me. It felt like my rubber bands had been like reactivated. Not hugely, but it was like enough that I could definitely feel it. Talk to everybody about fascia, because I think that even for people who are medical professionals, I had a meeting with my doctor and I told her about this and she was like, oh, that's interesting. We don't know much about that. Yeah. So even for people who are well educated about this sort of thing, they don't necessarily understand what this is, what it does, and how pervasive it is through the body.
Think of it as connective tissue that surrounds every cell. They even speculate or hypothesize that it goes into the nucleus of the cell. The possibility of that is staggering and exciting. Between the layers of fascia is glidy substance called hyaluronic acid. And when the hyaluronic acid gets dehydrated, it has a change of pH, it gets sticky. So then things don't glide. And if you repeatedly do things or injure things like we do if we sit at a computer for a long time, and we lose glidiness in one part of the body, other parts of the body are going to try and make up for that resistance, and they become more glidey. But obviously you've got some stuff stuck, other stuff glidier. Over time, what's overly glidey now becomes stuck. So you start to create the wrong kind of tension and lack of glide in your whole body. So we were talking about your knee, and many knee problems are because of lack of glide in the ankles or the feet. So you want to diagnose where it's coming from. But with my system, we're covering the whole body, but people that are participating get to notice like, wow, my shoulder blades don't glide on my rib cage. Oh, that explains why I keep hurting my shoulder. The other thing that's just fascinating about the fascia, and I came to understanding the fascia the way I use it now. I was moved to Southern California, was training athletes, and I put them on the unstable surfaces and things like that. And I'm like, that is changing too quick for it to be the nervous system. Something else is going on here. There's a family in Italy, it's the Stecco family, and they are doing pretty much the most revolutionary work in fascia. And so I looked at their books and I said, this is the first time I've seen a manual therapy technique match up with the way I see the body move. Their research has explained so much about why my work works. You know what? The fascia is a synapse. Like, it's the thing that connects the nerve to the muscle. So if your fascia is messed up, your nerve muscle signal's not going to be precise. And it'll be slow.
Talk to me a little bit about, you've written a bit of controversial things about yoga. You have some strong feelings about yoga.
I do.
Tell me about that.
Okay. So when I was practicing in New York, so I started my practice in the beginning of 1983. And yoga was starting to make its way into New York. So you had the Integral Yoga Center, because you're from New York, I know, and then the Iyengar Center. So I was getting these yoga instructors, and they tended to have problems with their sacroiliac joint and their low back. And I would treat them, and they would come back with the same problem. Don't do that to me, because it drives me crazy. I'm going to try and figure out, okay, I don't want to correct the same thing more than once. What are you doing? And I said, could you just not do yoga for a week? And then the treatments would hold. Now that I understand how the fascia works, when you hold a position too long, instead of the wavy shape of the collagen fibers, the protein fibers in the fascia, they straighten out. So you lose your elasticity, your rebound. You get flexible, but you lose your durability and you lose your responsiveness. There are fun and good ways of doing yoga. It's just holding postures is not the answer. And I think that there are better ways to get mobility if that's what you're going to yoga for.
I will tell you, of all the things I've done in my life, I have hurt myself worse in yoga than anything else, than martial arts fighting, like high-speed ski racing. No, yoga.
I hear you. Oh my gosh. I used to work with Broadway performers, dancers, and they wouldn't hurt themselves dancing. They hurt themselves in yoga class, and they wouldn't get up.
Right. So now you've opened this little box for me. And when I get up in the morning, I'm 65, I'm a little stiff. And before I go out and do any activity, I spend about maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes. I do a couple down dogs, I do some up dogs, I try and stretch things out a little bit. And then I seem to feel better. Should I not be doing that?
It's fine if you feel better, because motion is lotion. So you're not holding those positions, but in 6 minutes, I could give you a program that would be better. And truthfully, if you wake up stiff in the morning at any age, I'd like to think that you're not doing enough Rev 6, because I don't wake up stiff. I don't think regular participants in the virtual classes wake up stiff either. But you know what, if you do, then you have to start thinking what's inflammatory in your life, and then things like, how are you sleeping? What's your mattress like? But I think investing 6 minutes when you wake up in the morning is a small investment for
a deal. Absolutely. Do that.
Right.
I have no allegiance to any system or any methodology. It's just, what works for David. That's really all I'm interested in.
As I mentioned earlier, if there were a better system than Rev 6, I'd be doing it, because all I care about is results, lasting results.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What's your goal? What are we trying to achieve here?
So when I developed my program, and, obviously it's an evolution, but I wouldn't say it's an evolution as much as it's a refinement. When you see the kind of results that I see and the trainers and the people taking class see, you want it for everyone. I want people to age well, feel empowered, maintain their posture, their gait, their zest for life. I want to be active until, you put me in the ground. And, we will temper our activities depending upon, our history. Like you've beaten yourself up with what you've done. You might be creaky in your knees or something like that, but you might not be. I hold the possibility that with healthy fascia, I'm so surprised that things that I thought were not going to go away in people go away. So I'd like everybody to really have fun in their life. And we spoke a little bit. Another cool thing about when you get the fascia organized is what it does for your well-being and keeping you in having access to the flow state. Who doesn't want that, right?
Once you experience that, it's like, that's the drug I want.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Since other people may not know what that means, like being in that zone, being in flow state, what do you mean by that?
I remember the first time that I experienced flow state. I was skiing down, I was mountain, maybe it was a bump run or something like that. I was 17 and I felt like I was hit by a bolt of lightning. And I'm like, what just happened? Did I just have a God moment, a spiritual awakening? Because, you're fully immersed in the experience. For me, time, and this is what happens, time slows down and you feel oneness with all that is. Like, hey, I know people look for that in their meditations, and that's really cool. I would love to get it every time I'm moving and exercising. So Rev 6 helps keep people on that, in that micro flow state. So it's easier to drop off when, say, I'm going to do a 5-hour hike, so it's accessible because it keeps us healthy, keeps our body healthier, our brain healthier, and we get to take more advantage of what we're doing.
Is there a neurological benefit to doing this?
Huge. So everything is on unstable surfaces. So you're recruiting a lot of neurons to keep yourself balanced. And so, yes, I train. We work with older people doing the workout in sitting on chairs. And I know this sounds hard to believe, but one of the ingredients that I think is super important for a good training or performance program is that there has to be a perception of risk.
100%. Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm such a believer in risk. And I think what happens is people, as we get older, myself included, we narrow that risk boundary down. I had lunch with a guy who just badly injured his leg and it was being repaired now. And he was telling me like, well, considering this and this just sort of weird thing happened, or I was hiking, I guess I'm really going to have to sort of like reevaluate my activity. And I said, absolutely not. Like, no, if you do that, your life it's just going to keep collapsing down and very small. And I believe in stress and I believe in risk. People give me some pushback on that. You don't have to do risk like I do risk, but you need to keep pushing out because the entropy going the other way will crush you down to zero if you don't. Anyway, that's my wrap on risk.
I'm so glad to hear you acknowledge that. Like when I was starting the training and I was working with baseball players and I'd put them on the flat side of a Bosu ball, which is like, 8 inches off the ground, And I saw that their performance was as though I had asked them to cling from a cliff, hang on. And I just saw how the performance went up for them. So I just began to build it into everything, and like falling off the ball, like you're like, I'm falling off the ball, it gets to be expected. It gets to be fun. It's like, oh, good. I pushed my limits a bit. So we can push our limits even sitting on a cushion. So I'm glad to hear risk is important to you.
I want to say to everyone out there, I fell off the ball all the time. And the ball plus the Bosu, forget it. There was no way that was happening, but first time, not happening yet. It will happen. I rarely get this enthusiastic about something. I had very low expectations. I want to tell you, I'm a very negative person about new things. I think all new people, I'm not going to like them, and all new modalities are dumb and they're a waste of time. I have this negativity bias, but the good part of the negativity bias is I'm constantly surprised. And so I'm like, oh, wow, that was really great. That's how I felt about Rev 6. It's like, oh, okay, all right, we got this ball. All right, like, here I'm this big, strong guy. What am I going to do here? But no, this was great. I just want to say I'm like super impressed. I'm going to order the bells. I didn't have the bells last time. So this time I'm going to order the bells and we'll do this properly.
Fabulous. Because the bells you fill with water, so you have the added slosh, so you keep stimulating your nervous system. I'm really a stickler for the texture of the ball and texture of the equipment because our fascia has more neurology even than our deep fascia. And so I love, because it's really only been in the last 2 years that this research has come out. They were very surprised to see the histology of the superficial fascia. And it explained to me why I watch people on the ball, and if it's too soft, I just cringe, because we're getting feedback. The superficial fascia is perceiving the tension of the ball, the texture and the tension or the tone. We want the equipment to match up with healthy fascia. So it's like training wheels for your fascia. I'm trying to remember what led into that question. Oh, about the nervous system. Since the fascia is really the connector between the nerve and the muscle, and the fascia is so interconnected that every cell is surrounded by fascia, it happens so quickly and it's so dynamic and it's so malleable so fast. That's why you could take one class and notice the elasticity. So the most common comment people say after the first workout is, I feel taller. That's exciting because the only way you get taller is when you're activating your core. And I have a whole different concept of what the core is that we don't have to get into. But coming at performance and exercise from a deficiency, an illness model going to wellness has taught me things about the body that I didn't read about until 30 years later, 40 years later. And I still hold on to some concepts that I'm waiting for somebody else to validate. But I think I just have to do the research myself.
Talking about strength training, I read something about we're all doing strength training wrong. What are your feelings on strength training?
All right. So I have this ebook that it's free on the website, and it's fitness myths. And I think the one that's been most controversial is the webinar that I gave that says the title was The Crippling Truth About Strength Training. And there was a lot of buzz within the Rev 6 community, like, should you say such negative things? I'm like, we're just trying to get people's attention, but most people do strength training incorrectly. Rev is a strength training program. Depending upon how much weight you want to load, can create as much strength as you want or need. But if you're not attending to your fascia when you're strength training, it's not going to convert. You're going to be lifting weights. It's not necessarily going to turn into functional strength. If it doesn't turn into functional strength, if it doesn't improve your posture, if it doesn't improve your mobility, if it doesn't improve your gait significantly, it's the wrong program. Now, if you love to lift weights, if you do Rev 6 as a warm-up, you're going to get a zillion times more out of your strength training. And I'll tell you a quick story. I had partnered with a studio, and the trainers were required to know Rev 6. one guy was really opposed to Rev 6 because he was all about Olympic lifting. So he learned Rev 6 and noticed that his Olympic lifting skyrocketed. So I pretty much can guarantee that you're going to get more out of your strength program if you incorporate a healthy fascial exercise program.
In my previous career as a photographer, and I did a big story for the New York Times Magazine, Olympians and their various sort of body shapes. And one of the people that I photographed was a female powerlifter. What shocked me about the female powerlifter was she was maybe 5'1" or 5'2". She had the jump of a frog. Astonishing to me. She had probably like a 40-inch vertical because it's the spring, right? Of course, she was strong, but it's the spring that really does it. Yeah.
Well, good power lifters like Ed Cohen, who's like the most famous power lifter, he's never injured his back. When he sets up, before he does the lift, just the tension he's created in his body, which is the fascia, lifted the weights about 2 inches off the ground. So you have to have really healthy fascia to get that far in powerlifting. But I'm not sure, most of the baseball players that I worked with did not like lifting weights because it made them slower. So kind of all depends on if you're doing it the right way. And some body types, sometimes it's your genetic makeup also.
I'm about 173 pounds. And unless you pump me full of serious anabolics, that's all it's going to be. Yeah, I think it depends a lot on what the sport is, and aerobic sport is an anaerobic sport. What are you?
But you see the conversion of your strength training to your skiing, correct?
What I learned last year, which I mentioned to you earlier, was that gym stamina, gym strength, gym power doesn't convert one-to-one. It's a different thing. And it's definitely helpful if I'm doing a proper turn. I mean, I'm not that good, but I'm pulling at least 2 Gs on a single leg, and you have to hold that, because if you don't, bad things are going to happen to you. I also think there's something to be said just to have a certain amount of mass, because you're going to fall down. And there's a protective element to that, I think. As I mentioned earlier, I've sort of changed up what I'm doing this year. So I spin bike like once a month. But basically all of that sort of stamina aerobic component, it's with a weight vest climbing up a mountain. There's the proprioception, there's the core strength. If your core and back aren't on, you're just going to tip over. And a lot of this I found was missing, but I still think that there's definitely a strength component there. You just can't do it otherwise.
Yeah. So are you getting enough lateral plane strength training? Because one of the things that we get stuck on is our sport tends to be in one plane. Right. And, you can read where that's the only plane to train. My experience is that you want all planes well trained. And so what kind of lateral are you doing?
So my lateral is somewhat limited at the moment because of my issues with my left knee. So when that's behaving properly, yes, then there's weighted lateral movement. We do most things, I'd say 2/3 of my training is all single leg, and it'll be movement, it'll be rotational, but there's also, for the sort of like big stuff, it's sagittal plane, deadlift, squat, leg press, something like that. But you're correct. You need to have, because the movement of skiing is a lateral sport. It's not, there's an up and down component to it, but it's a lateral sport. Anyway, we've talked a lot, bored people to death with all my skiing stories endlessly. Dr. Edythe, if somebody wants to get in touch with you and they want to understand better about what Rev 6 is, maybe they want to try a class, what do they do?
Go to the website, rev6.fit. It's really cool that there was a .fit, not just a .com. And go to Get Started on the website, and it'll lead you to videos describing the ball that you need, how you want the ball to, the tension in the ball, what you need to get started. And there are 3 basic videos there. And then I like people to do about 10 of those videos before they sign up for classes. So you can buy a pack of classes, or you can sign up for a membership, which is unlimited classes and replays. We also have an Instagram presence, Rev6. That's the best way to find me.
Before we close, I want to say something you told me earlier before I got on the call. The goal here was to match health span to lifespan.
You got it. So I'm sad to know that most people, the difference is 10 years or more. And I think your viewers and the people that I serve, that's not their goal. So I believe that Rev6 gives people one of the best opportunities to make those 2 align.
I'm going to ask something really incorrect here. How old are you?
I'm 68.
Very spunky.
I couldn't be moving like this if it weren't for Rev6. My husband, my son, and his wife got back from New Zealand, where we hiked the Milford Track. And that is a 5-day, lodge to lodge. And it's considered easy and intermediate. Well, there was one day where it was 17 switchbacks going up to the highest point, and then the downhill was even steeper. And what I hadn't trained for is the size of the boulders that you're going down. And I was the shortest person in the group. So I definitely felt my knee, but I was really pleased with the eccentric that Rev had provided. I didn't get winded or anything like that. So I love that, I can go out and play on the weekends and do what I want to do at this age. And I'm going to keep it up.
You got another 30 years in, Edythe.
I think so too. And I'm going to stay on the ski slope as well.
Park City, that's where I am. Come and visit.
I will. I love skiing in Utah.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to meet you, and look forward to seeing you in class.
Absolutely. Take care now.
Bye, David.